War never ends, it only evolves. And while the world craves peace, the engines of conflict keep grinding, louder, faster, and deeper than ever. From nuclear standoffs to water wars, from airspace bans to border bombings, one truth remains unchanged. Welcome to another episode of Conspiracy Theories. Today we're diving into the idea that war isn't just a geopolitical event, but a profit machine. According to believers, the military-industrial complex doesn't just respond to wars, it benefits from them, fueling a cycle where conflict leads to profit, and profit encourages more conflict. Recent conflicts such as Pakistan versus India, Russia, Ukraine war, China, Taiwan conflict, Israel's unjustified attacks on Gaza will surely prove this theory in future, supporting the narrative of war feeds military. In this episode, we'll explore the roots of this theory and examine whether war really does feed the military for reasons beyond national security. Let us begin with our first point. The idea that wars are driven by the business of selling weapons suggests that powerful interests, particularly defense companies, political figures, and military leaders, may work together to promote or extend conflicts to make money. According to this view, the sale of military equipment isn't just a result of war, but one of the main reasons behind it. This belief points to how defense companies earn large profits during times of war, thanks to increased government spending on weapons and military tools. Some claims go further, saying that threats are sometimes exaggerated or events are faked to justify military action. These moves are thought to create a false need for weapons, which then boosts profits for the defense industry. Historically, this concern is not new. After World War I, weapons makers were heavily criticized and called merchants of death for supposedly helping to cause the war. One of the most well-known voices on this topic was Major General Smedley Butler, whose 1935 book, War is a Racket, argued that war mostly benefits big businesses. While the idea that wars are started just to sell weapons isn't backed by strong proof, the worry behind it is real. The defense world works in a system where money often lines up with more military action. Even if companies and officials don't start wars directly, they may still support actions that lean toward using force instead of peaceful solutions. This shows the need to look closely at how money, power, and policy connect in today's military system. Before World War II, the United States kept a relatively small military force and did not invest heavily in government-run weapons production. Instead, the country relied on civilian industries to switch to military output during wartime. World War II changed that system entirely. The scale of the conflict required a much larger and more organized effort. Under President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the War Production Board was created to direct civilian industries toward military needs. This shift caused arms production to grow from about 1% to nearly 40% of the country's annual economic output, reshaping American industry. After the war, the start of the Cold War brought a new global environment where ongoing military readiness became necessary. The earlier system of temporary wartime production was no longer effective. A permanent defense sector was established, and partnerships between private companies and the government became standard. Firms like Boeing and General Motors expanded their defense work, playing a major role in this new structure. This long-term change was originally made for strategic reasons. However, over time, the defense sector became a strong economic force on its own. It developed its own influence in both politics and business, forming what became known as the military-industrial complex. The modern military-industrial complex is a large interconnected system linking the military, defense contractors, research institutions, and political figures. It is not a single entity, but a wide network of organizations that operate together within the defense sector. Its main parts include the Pentagon, military branches, private weapons manufacturers, and members of Congress with ties to defense spending. Also involved are nonprofit research centers, university labs, and government-owned production facilities. This system includes both large contractors and the many smaller companies that support them. In the U.S., the defense budget exceeds $800 billion annually, giving the industry strong influence over national policy. This network often helps shape decisions on military funding, equipment purchases, and defense strategies. Understanding the war sells military equipment narrative requires a close look at the development and structure of the global arms trade. This industry, shaped over time by technological innovation and geopolitical strategy, plays a central role in how conflicts are equipped and sustained. The arms industry began taking its modern form in the late 19th century, driven by industrial advances in weapons production. Companies like the Ellswick Ordnance Company supplied advanced artillery to governments, while the introduction of the machine gun marked a major shift in battlefield effectiveness. Germany led in weapons innovation, giving it a significant advantage in World War I. As production expanded, many nations began exporting weapons abroad. France, for instance, lifted its ban on arms exports in 1885, encouraging trade without major restrictions. However, the devastation of World War I led to public backlash, with arms dealers labeled as merchants of death, though investigations found no clear proof of war being started for profit. The global defense industry is dominated by a small group of powerful corporations that lead in arms production and exports. At the forefront are U.S.-based firms, which consistently top global rankings in both revenue and market share. Their edge lies in advanced technology, massive scale, and deep-rooted government relationships, placing them firmly at the center of today's military-industrial complex. Between 2019 and 2023, the 5 biggest arms exporters were the United States, France, Russia, China, and Germany. Together, they made up about 75% of all global arms exports. The United States alone was responsible for 42%, showing just how much influence it holds in both economic and strategic terms. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute says the 5 biggest defense companies by earnings in 2023 were Lockheed Martin, RTX Corporation, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and General Dynamics. Their combined profits made up a large part of the $632 billion earned by the world's top 100 defense firms that year. Other major players include BAE Systems, Thales, Rheinmetall, Leonardo, and AeroVironment, each playing a key role in the global defense network. The global arms trade is driven by a concentrated group of major exporters and a wide range of importing nations, reflecting deep geopolitical patterns and national security priorities. Between 2019 and 2023, the United States accounted for 42% of all global arms exports, followed by France and Russia at 11% each. China and Germany held smaller shares at 5.8% and 5.6%. This level of concentration highlights how a few states dominate the supply of advanced weaponry worldwide. The world's biggest arms manufacturers also show this uneven distribution. In 2023, Lockheed Martin earned over $60 billion from selling weapons, making it the top defense company. It was followed by RTX Corporation, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and General Dynamics. These companies make a large portion of their money from military deals, many of which are long-term contracts with governments. BAE Systems, for instance, gets almost all its income from defense work. These firms play a major role in shaping military budgets and decisions, working closely with national governments on defense planning and spending. The revolving door refers to the frequent movement of people between government jobs, such as lawmakers or regulators, and roles in private industries they once oversaw. This exchange often involves former officials joining companies as employees and is especially common in sectors influenced by government policies. Critics warn this creates conflicts of interest and regulatory capture, where agencies serve the industries rather than the public. Governments hire industry experts for their knowledge and connections, hoping to improve regulation and gain political support. At the same time, private companies recruit former officials to access government networks, influence laws, and win contracts. Former regulators, with insider knowledge of rules and relationships, can profit greatly after moving to these companies. Modern warfare, especially after 9/11, has led to massive profits for defense contractors and related industries. These financial gains have raised serious concerns about war profiteering and the influence of economic interests on prolonged conflict. During the Iraq War, the U.S. government spent over $138 billion on contracts, with the top 10 firms receiving more than $72 billion. KBR, once part of Halliburton, alone received at least $39.5 billion. Lockheed Martin reported a 41% rise in profits just 1 year after the invasion, driven by increased demand for military technology. By 2014, Iraq's once state-controlled oil sector had become dominated by foreign private companies, raising questions about underlying economic motivations. Contractors like Bechtel, Halliburton, and Blackwater faced accusations of overcharging, yet legislative efforts like the War Profiteering Prevention Act of 2007 were never passed. In Afghanistan, the total U.S. cost reached $2.3 trillion. Nearly half of the Pentagon's $14 trillion spending since 9/11 went to contractors. The top 5 arms firms, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and General Dynamics, secured $2.02 trillion in contracts while spending $1 billion on lobbying, achieving a 181,214% return. Reports revealed widespread fraud, corruption, and inefficiency among contractors, with some funds even ending up in Taliban hands. Defense companies during wartime continue to raise serious legal and ethical concerns. Despite frequent allegations of overbilling and fraud in military contracts, efforts to regulate these practices remain limited. The War Profiteering Prevention Act of 2007, intended to criminalize war profiteering, was never passed, revealing the difficulty of enforcing accountability in a sector dominated by powerful interests. International organizations have increasingly warned about the risks associated with arms sales. UN experts have cautioned that supplying weapons to active conflict zones, such as Israel, could lead to serious violations of international law, including potential complicity in war crimes. They emphasize the need for strict human rights checks before approving arms transfers. Several countries, including China, Serbia, Turkey, and the UAE, have been accused of violating international treaties by sending newly manufactured weapons to Sudan, despite the Darfur arms embargo. These actions breach the Arms Trade Treaty, which aims to prevent the misuse of weapons in human rights abuses. The United States, while the world's largest arms exporter, has not ratified the treaty. In today's world, the control of natural resources remains a key motivation. A well-known example is the Carter Doctrine, which stated that the United States would use military force if necessary to protect its interests in the Persian Gulf. This highlights how critical oil is to national strategy. The Iraq War also reflected this trend. Before the 2003 invasion, Iraq's oil industry was managed by the state. By 2014, private foreign companies had taken over much of the production, revealing how war can shift control of valuable resources. Russia's actions in places like Syria and the Central African Republic have also been linked to efforts to secure oil, minerals, and trade routes. Economic research supports this connection. When vital resources are scarce and in constant demand, the risk of conflict rises. Armed conflict is rarely the result of a single cause. Instead, It emerges from a complex mix of political, economic, social, and historical conditions that interact in powerful ways. Internal conflicts, for example, are often shaped by both economic motives, like control over valuable resources, and grievances rooted in inequality, exclusion, or ethnic and religious tensions. These conditions often build over time, creating environments where violence becomes more likely. Trade relations can influence the likelihood of war as well. Some economic theories suggest that free trade and mutual dependence reduce the risk of conflict by making peace more profitable. However, others argue that global capitalism can heighten international tensions by shifting internal economic pressures onto global systems. That wraps up today's look at the war feeds military conspiracy theory. Whether driven by profit or policy, the relationship between war and industry raises serious questions. As always, it's up to you to explore the facts, question the narrative, and decide where truth ends and theory begins.